Beauty.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to yet another episode of XYZ Live. First of all, I do apologise for the slight lateness. We're about 5 minutes late this time. It was, first of all, Dave's fault.
Matty's late.
And then our guest didn't get the link, probably because I sent in the wrong one, but that's not my fault. That was Dave's fault. And, yeah, that's the intro.
Hello, everybody.
Probably because I sent in the wrong one, but that's not my fault. Now Dave's listening to us on his iPad, and the sound just came up. Sorry about that. That's hilarious.
We're professionals.
So we've got a guest back. Bradley from the Australian Protectionist Party has decided to join us this week to discuss all the issues of the week. Welcome back, Bradley from the Australian Protectionist Party.
Thank you very much, Matty, and obviously a few little technical issues tonight, but thank you very much for having me back. I'm looking forward to doing the show.
Great. So before we get into the main thing, I will just remind everyone to come and join us on Entropy. I just linked it in the chat. It's also linked in the description of the video. You can just click it there. Very simple, just essentially one click, and then you sign in with your YouTube account, your Gmail account. Just essentially go through it that way. No other accounts required, and you can come over and you can send super chats. You can ask us direct questions as well, and you can vote on other people's questions. So ultimately, it makes our life a lot easier. And if you do want to ask us a question, you can do that. And if you want to send us a donation, you can do that as well. And all donations are obviously very much appreciated. Philip Cunningham in chat says that we're Mossad agents. Not anymore. That's a joke. But yeah, so this week there's quite a bit of news regarding lots of things around, especially Aboriginal culture.
It's been a week of virtue signalling.
Really. A week of virtue signalling, really, yeah.
Which just happened to line up with NIDOC Week.
I'd never heard of NIDOC Week before.
We're trying to figure out what the actual acronym means. Bradley, do you know what NIDOC Week actually stands for?
No, probably. I mean, I could probably guess, but I don't know. Sure. So,
it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
But basically, it just means everybody has to virtue signal even harder about Aboriginal issues than usual. I actually I went to the ABC website last week, and I typed in the usual ABC URL to find it. And the URL actually took me to a page which was dedicated specifically to Aboriginal issues. I actually had to click a link to actually find the actual news because they were dedicating the entire week to Aboriginal issues. So yeah, virtue signalling has just been at full pelt.
Well, we started off with the issue of Uluru, i.e. Ayers Rock. We should just call it Ayers Rock.
Well, what's this Uluru?
I know. It's Ayers Rock.
Yes.
And I've come to the conclusion, I've said this a few times on my own social media, I'm not sure if I said on the live stream last week, but I think that we should just bite the bullet and turn Ayers Rock into a casino and put a massive pool on the top of the rock.
I like the idea of that.
Wouldn't that be pretty awesome, yeah? Yes. Just an open air pool on the top of Ayers Rock.
Would it be 50 meters long? You could probably do that.
I'm sure the rock's big enough for us to make a 50-meter pool and a hotel casino. You have to hollow the rock out first and put it in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we could also use it to store nuclear waste potentially.
That too,
and it would glow green at night.
Do you know what we should do? Maybe just go to the top of Ayers Rock and just pour nuclear waste down it.
I'd say it would be
so
like
it glows. Yeah, so it's like at Christmas lights. Wouldn't that be cool?
Christmas in the desert.
Christmas in the desert. Yeah. I think that'd work. That'd work very nicely if you ask me. Pauline Hanson rightly called out the closure of the rock, which is happening, I believe, at the end of October this year. And I noted in my video that one of the justifications for closing the climb was that not enough people wanted to do it. but the reason not many people were climbing was because it was closed 70% of the time.
Because
Or
they were
80%
preventing
of the time.
people from actually getting
They're preventing people, and they're telling people that, oh, it's disrespectful to climb. So they're basically trying to browbeat people into not doing the climb, and then they've managed to get it below the recommended or the target amount, and they're like, nah, we're closing it now. And I don't think it has anything to do with spirituality or all that rubbish. That's an absolute load of crap.
Yeah, they were always going to close it. They just want to take away something that we have.
Yeah, they just want to take it away, and they want to say, no, it's ours. It's purely a power trip because this is how they operate. Well, it's not. It's the way the leftists who influence them operate. So I don't necessarily think it's the actual Aboriginal people themselves. I suspect it's almost certainly the leftists that are in the area, the worm tongues, trying to use it as a power play against white Australians.
Absolutely. Bradley, do you have anything to say on the matter of Ayers Rock?
Not really. I don't know a great deal about it, and I think that you guys have probably summed it up pretty well anyway. So, I don't specifically have a lot to say about Ayers Rock. Obviously, it's a significant landmark in Australia, and obviously there's a lot of people who would be very interested in climbing it. But, obviously not everybody wants them to climb it. But like you guys, I think it's probably a product of the power trip thing and the social hierarchy and, kind of like the racial hierarchy that's been put in place by political correctness, whereby human beings are obviously we are hypersocial animals. We're like a number of other different animals and even insect species. I mean, we've been compared with bees, for example. That we humans are just like bees need their hive. We humans need our society. But as members of a hypersocial species, it's some kind of inevitable that we will form various types of social hierarchies. And I think in our kind of multiracial society that we are now, it's political correctness dominant. It's, that they've effectively created a new type of racial hierarchy where the PC zealots have basically put Aborigines at the top of that hierarchy. And I think whites are down the bottom. And they're very keen to sort of maintain that hierarchy and continually sort of like reinforce it. And I think, the Ayers Rock issue is probably just another manifestation of that.
Yeah, it's really a way of showing us who's boss. It's like, okay, you people, you're not allowed to climb this big rock in the middle of the desert because we say so.
Yep, and it's exactly the same with these welcome to country ceremonies. There's you guys are talking about that on your website. I mean, we're going to welcome you to our country sort of thing. Again, you see it in so many now. You see it in political events. It's constantly. You see it with the AFL. You see it. This constant reference to the Aborigines. The constant paying tribute to them. It's like who's got the power in the society, and it's not that the Aborigines themselves have the power. They don't. It's just that the progressive, hyper-leftist, PC, SJW fundamentalist mindset is what is dominating, and that mindset is ultra favourable toward Aborigines and much less favourable to white people, and so that's what they're imposing on our society.
Spot on.
Correct.
Yeah,
that's right, and you see it everywhere. We're going to be talking about the Adam Goodes documentary. I finally managed to watch most of it. Watched most of it now. The first sort of just before an hour or so in the last couple of minutes. So we'll talk about that in a minute. They're really going hard on shoving it down our throat. They really, really are. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the left are genuinely losing control of the narrative and they don't know what to do. So all they can really think of is to double down on attacking white people. And the way they do that is by calling us racist. Ray-rays. All they do is call us Ray-rays.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's like, the progressive left are so hell bent on not giving any ground to the right, and so rather than sort of give any ground to their perceived political opponents, or admit that they're wrong, or admit that they're overreaching, or anything like that, instead, as you suggested, that it's like they're just doubling down and taking the PC narrative to ever increasing extremes. They just are taking stupid new levels of stupid, and I think inevitably people are waking up to that and pushing back against that, because it's a little bit like a lackey band in one sense. You can stretch a lackey band, and you could keep on stretching it and keep on stretching it, but it reaches a point where eventually it's going to snap back. And that's where we're at in the culture war. The progressive left, the SJWs are constantly overreaching and stretching that great big metaphorical lackey band, and eventually it's just going to snap back in the other direction. And I'm like, bring on that day. Let's bring on the snap.
Well, I can't wait to hurt leftist fingers.
Yeah, that's not nice. But it reminds me of a video by Blackpilled, which he released a couple of months ago, called "White Guys Are Nice Guys Until We're Not."
Oh yeah,
and he really nailed it. He was essentially a review of the film Office Space, which I remember watching when I was younger. I'd never actually worked in an office when I watched that, and when I did work in an office, once when I worked in an office, it was about like that. But probably the main time I worked in an office, it wasn't quite. It was a little bit different, but still, the way he breaks it down is brilliant. In that, it's like that. So white guys will put up with a lot, and they'll keep tolerating it, and they'll keep tolerating it, and then they won't tolerate it. We won't tolerate it, and then when that happens, what he pointed out was the sort of the message of the film was that white guys, they come up with the solution first, and then they tolerate, and then they go straight to the solution that they came up with in the first place. And what they talk about in the film is that there's the main characters who work out the scam to take the money, but then there's that other sort of weirdo guy who says that at the start that he wants to burn the office down, and he goes straight to that solution at the end. So I think what the left should be very wary of is that potential for a very, very properly extreme reaction if they keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. Hopefully we can just push back enough that it's not necessary, because right now the reaction is simply, well, you know what? If you're going to keep doing this, I'm going to make a YouTube channel and talk about it. We're going to make XYZ. That was our solution to start off with. But then what we saw was censorship, algorithmic suppression, literal removal, slander, and all this kind of thing just thrown at us. And it's like, well, you're pushing your luck. But and then they have this cultural thing where they browbeat us into never having an opinion. We're never allowed to criticize anyone. We're never allowed to have an opinion at all. They call us rays whenever we stand up for our own people, even. And it's funny because in this documentary, I actually I took a screenshot of the definition of racist that they used. And the definition of racist that they use in this documentary is literally discrimination on the basis of race. So discrimination is choice. When I choose between two brands of tea, I choose this one, Twinings Chai. That's my tea there, and I choose not to. It's
all over Australia.
Yeah, I'm discriminating against other tea types.
Twinings is now the face of racism in Australia.
Twinings Chai is the tea that I prefer. I'm discriminating against Twinings Earl Grey or the other tea brands. I'm discriminating against them. I'm choosing this over others. Therefore, the definition of racism that they use in the Out of Goods documentary, it means that literally every person on the planet is racist, because literally every person on the planet prefers their own people over others. And that's just a fact. Even the ones that don't spend time with their own people, deep down, they prefer their own people. It's just natural instinct.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's just, they stretch the definition of racist or racism in any way they want to suit their agenda. They constantly shift the goalposts. They simply, move the window where they want to move it. And it's all about, getting what they want and dictating the agenda, dictating the narrative. And, I think that's one of the things that, we have to try to get that message out there more and more to people to, just not buy into the left's continued pushing of this anti-racism narrative, this notion that, racism is the most terrible, heinous moral sin imaginable. Because for the left, when you think about, some of the things in our society that really are terrible, like, crimes like murder or rape or pedophilia or something like that, it's like, but with the left, it's like, they see racism as being, as bad as that sort of thing. It's just this ridiculous overreach, just insanity. And like I said, they're constantly shifting the goalposts to wherever they want it to be. And, I just think that people need to be aware of that narrative, basically, be onto it, be suspicious of it, and don't buy into it.
Well, quite often, the definition of racism itself has actually been racist, because one of the left pushed the idea that racism is a combination of power and prejudice. And so white people they define as having all the power, even though, like we've been pointing out, like white people are at the bottom of the race of the race pyramid, basically, according to SJWs. But they define white people as having the power, and therefore, like, white people are inherently racist. And so their definition of racism is actually itself racist because it singles out white people.
Well, that's because the actual term itself is an anti-white racial slur deep down. I mean, it was originally created. It was originally created to shut white people up. I mean, the term racism was created by Franz Boas, a Jewish anthropologist who created the term to stop people criticizing non-European cultures, because when he went over there, he found that they were extremely violent and primitive. So he created the term racism to silence anyone who said those truths about these primitive cultures.
I'm glad you mentioned it as Boas. I've actually got to change a link in an article that I wrote about goods, because like if you look on Google, even DuckDuckGo, for the inventor of the term racism, it'll say Leon Trotsky.
Yep. And
then you've got a whole lot of leftist sites debunking the idea that it was Leon Trotsky, but it wasn't Trotsky, it was Boas.
Yeah.
Who invented racism. Yeah.
Yeah, there was Boas who invented it, who invented the term racism. It was Trotsky who used the term racist.
Okay.
I think that was the first time that the term racist was used. He used it to describe people in, I think it was in the Balkans, like Eastern European nationalists. He called them racists. But anyway, let's talk about this documentary. So, Bradley, you saw it. I've watched most of it so far. And for people who haven't seen it, you can go and watch it. You create a 10-play account and you can watch it there. But it's essentially just they've plugged together all these media clips and thrown in a few headlines and things like that, and backed it to music. And they've done they sort of gone through the story, and they've got this emotional music to set the scene and all that kind of thing. And they got all the different issues that happen around it, and they get all these people. They have all these comments from people that they made in the media. And to me, the whole purpose of it was to paint a picture of poor Adam Goodes standing up against racism and the evil white people dared to boo him, and they only booed him because they didn't want him to stand up to racism. And I've been seeing all these leftist reactions to it, and these leftists talking about it, saying, "Oh, well, you should watch it because it's really confronting, and you're going to see the truth," and da 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 da. But I've been watching it so far, and it is such an obvious rewriting and whitewash of the issue. It's just blatant.
Were you saying that they were even using like the scary music whenever a racist comes on, and the inspirational music?
Yeah, exactly. They use the and it's in black and white. Whenever Andrew Bolt has a an article, a headline that's like it's in black and white with the dun, dun, dun music, and whenever Adam Goods is saying something or an Aboriginal activist is saying something, yeah, it's like, what a hero. Oh, and then it's so sad, the poor thing, and then they go through all the booing, and it's just it's an absolute joke. And then they have Eddie Maguire crying on camera basically because he made that ape comment about King Kong, which I thought was funny. I thought it was quite funny. And then I think Adam Goods should just stop being so sensitive, to be honest. But I don't entirely blame him. I blame mainly the people around him, especially the people in AFL, like AFL higher ups and the media, who are so hell bent on pushing their anti-white agenda that they instantly pushed the narrative of Adam Goods victim, criticism of Adam Goods racism without even it was instant. It was like an automatic knee-jerk reaction, and they just ran with it and ultimately just made him even less popular than he already was. So what do you think about that one, Brad?
Yeah, look, I think you've summarised it very well. I watched the Goods documentary this morning, and I was probably a little bit surprised by it in one sense, because it was really just a rehash of the things that happened years ago. It was really just reminding us of the whole saga that happened years ago, but there was nothing. I don't think there was anything really even too preachy about it. There was nothing too sort of philosophical about it. I was actually a little bit surprised that they gave Sam Newman the time that they did, because they actually gave him quite a bit of opportunity to be critical of Adam Goods, and obviously the portrayal was that he was being unreasonable, sort of thing. But I think a lot of people would have watched it and agreed with Sam Newman. I don't think that documentary would have been any way, I don't think it would have made anyone change their mind on the issue at all. I think it would have just, reinforced their already determined view. I think that, people who would support him of Adam Goods would continue to support him, and people who are more critical of him would continue to be critical of him. So I don't know. It's one of those things. I mean, apparently the doco was made with his blessing, sort of thing. He sort of gave his approval to it. But I was a little bit surprised that they even made it. To me, it's kind of like another leftist own goal. I don't think they did themselves any favours. I don't think they did Adam Goods any favours. As for Adam Goods himself, I absolutely agree with your comment that Adam Goods was, I think, definitely being influenced by people around him, whether at the Sydney Swans or at the AFL. I mean, Adam Goods, as we all acknowledge, was an absolutely brilliant footballer, but he was not a brilliant intellect or a brilliant philosopher or a brilliant arbiter of right and wrong or anything like that. He's just a very ordinary man, a very ordinary Aboriginal footballer who I think was being pushed around in different directions and virtually glorified and deified by the AFL. He was like a poster boy for the AFL, and next thing you know, he's become this highly divisive national figure. I mean, him getting the Australian of the Year award was absolutely astonishing. I mean, now, okay, he wasn't the first Aboriginal to get the award and not deserve it, just like he wasn't the first sports person to get the award and not deserve it either. Unfortunately, we sort of live in a society where high profile sporting stars are more highly valued than they designs a bridge or something like that. And so they end up it becomes a bit of a bandwagon that we revere sports stars in a way that they even get Australian of the Year, sort of thing. It's a sad sign of the times and a sort of increasingly dystopian society, I think. But
I thought Stephen deserved his.
It was funny in the documentary how they highlighted the staging, and he had a bit of a tiff with Shane Warne about the staging, and even Eddie Maguire called him out over the staging for free kicks. And I'm basically up to the part where they go through the whole booing thing. It's funny that they brought up the grand final in 2014 where the Hawks smashed the Swans by 10 goals. And Adam Goods got booed the whole time. I remember that. I remember that game. I wasn't at that game, but I was at the pub watching it, very drunk. And I don't remember hearing any booing. I just remember watching the Hawks flog the Swans. It's funny because the picture at the end of that, after the Swans had just been flogged by 10 goals, they have a dejected looking at Adam Goods, and obviously they're trying to point out that, oh, he's sad because he got booed, and he's been bullied during the grand final.
Because he lost the grand
but he's sad because the team just lost the grand final by 10 goals, which is, I would imagine if they panned to any of the Sydney players on the field, they'd all have a pretty similar look. So I thought that was funny. I felt like they were really desperate to paint him as some sort of a victim. And they really went through it as, all these people say, oh, Australians are a racist country and da-da-da this, and Australians are the worst, and we've got all this embedded prejudice and embedded this and blah, 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 that. And it's been hard to watch, but I think you're right that nobody is going to change their mind based on that documentary. It's not like it's offering any new information whatsoever.
And also, like you said, it's amazing that they let Sam Newman say his piece. Like, it's incredible in that point at the start, like this, I've only seen a little bit of it, where Sam Newman makes the point, Adam Goods, we're not booing you because you're racist. Because we're racist. We're booing you because you're acting like a jerk. And the whole footy show audience erupts in applause. And so, like, it's making it clear, like, everybody understands why we're booing you. It's because you're dirty, and it's because you're making race. Well, not that you're making race an issue, but it's because you're really attacking everything this country is built on, and you're attacking us. Like, Australians have bent over backwards for decades to just try to atone for what we're told the sins of our forefathers, we've been trained to be colorblind in all of our approaches and just to treat everybody equally. And all this time, you've got non-white people, especially the non-white activists, like deliberately like advocating for non-white interests, while we're supposed to like just treat everybody equally regardless of race. And so for someone like Adam Goods, who has been the beneficiary of all this, like an amazing football career
and a life,
so many honors
and a life. Yeah, he's alive. His dad was Scottish, I believe.
Yes, to turn around and say, just remember whose country you're on. That's a smack in the face.
Yeah.
Remember
whose land you're on.
Yes, just remember whose land you're on. And like you were saying, you were talking about that black-pilled review of, and just the point that white guys are nice until they're not. And how it goes, he talks about the fact that white guys, they come up with that extreme solution early, but then they don't do it. It's one of the reasons why we are nice and so nice. It's because we know that once we go over that line, we're not going to stop. And so, like, once the white guys went over that line, they're like, right, we're going to boo this guy, and we are not going to stop.
And I booed him, and I'd boo him again if he was playing. If I was at a local game, and I was over like, boo. Sorry, he hasn't apologized yet.
The other thing is, that they kept saying that, he was booed into retirement. That was the other narrative, which I think was complete BS, because, I mean, he was 35 when he retired, if I recall. I think it was 35. And, I mean, most footballers don't play in the AFL until they're that old. I mean, clearly he was past his best. It slowed down. It was time for him to retire anyway. So I actually think that narrative that he was booed into retirement was absolute BS. But just on what David was saying, absolutely correct. I mean, this whole anti-racism narrative is a kind of rigged morality. It's completely stacking the deck, as I use the term. It's sort of like a rigged morality that's rigged against white people. And an analogy that I use, it's a little bit like playing a game of cards where your opponent can use the joker but you can't use the joker. And we see it over and over again that, non-whites can play the racist card, they can play identity politics, they can play the victim card, they can exploit that. But with the PC narrative, white people can't do that. So we can't play identity politics because we'll get hounded down for being racist. And so, it's a very rigged morality. It's rigged against white people. And we see it over and over again, but we are pushing back, we are learning, and we are, it's what we're doing on this show. We're helping, I hope, to educate people about political correctness and how it works and why we should be highly suspicious of it and not buy into its narrative, because it is a narrative that is effectively, viciously and inherently anti-white, and we simply should not do those values.
And in fact, we actually have to relearn a lot of the patterns of behavior that have been socialized out of us. Like white people, we actually have to learn to preference each other, to form organizations that explicitly advocate for white interests, and to basically become immune to the charge of racism. Because as we understand, it's an anti-white term designed to undermine formerly homogenous white countries. So there's a reason why this term racism exists. It's used as a weapon in order to bring about socialism and to basically replace us. So that's ultimately what this is about as well. Like, because when Adam Goodes was saying, just remember whose land you're on, he was saying, okay, this is not your country anymore. We're going to take over. That's essentially what it is. It's basically saying to white people, to Anglo-Saxon people, people of British heritage, people of European heritage, this isn't your country anymore. And you've got to get used to the idea that it's not your country. And when we reacted to it, we're told that's racist. That's their weapon. That's how they stop us from actually standing up for ourselves and standing up for the idea that this is actually our country.
Yeah. And they try and that's the whole point of it. It's about shutting up whites.
Yeah.
That's the reason that the term was created. And I've made this point before, I'm sure, but if the races were reversed, and if Adam Goodes was a white guy and he'd said, remember whose land you're on. Imagine if he'd said that, remember whose land you're on, and he's a white guy. And imagine if he'd said, I'm a proud white person who is proud of my heritage, just as Adam Goodes had said that, and then he got booed. The mainstream media and all the AFL elites and all these people wouldn't rush to his defense. They'd go, well, what did you say to get yourself booed? And it's that racial double standard. The reason they are upset. Sorry?
He'd lose his job.
He'd probably lose his job. I mean, look what happened to Israel Folau for daring to express religious beliefs that go against the LGBTQP community. He was lambasted by the media, and then eventually, we saw the saga with that. But that's essentially what happens if you say things that go against the narrative, or it's worse if you're a white person. Israel Folau, if he was white, it would have been even worse for him, I would imagine. But even the Islander card didn't save him in that regards. But if Adam Goodes if it was a racial reversal, then we wouldn't hear the end of it. It would be the white guy who would be considered the bad guy. He would be attacked and pilloried, and the only reason the people in the crowd are getting attacked by these sycophantic PC thugs in the mainstream is because they are people of European heritage, so Australian people daring to call out an Aboriginal or a man who identifies with the half of his blood that's Aboriginal, for calling him out for his opinions off the field and his actions on the field. That is the only reason they're upset. It's because white people are daring to say, no, you can't do that. You can't say that. We are actually standing up for ourselves. And apparently by standing up for ourselves against bullies, like it's genuine bullies, that makes us the bullies. The level of gaslighting that's come out of this is ridiculous. It's absolutely off the charts. And we're going to go through the Waleed Aly's take on it shortly, which was he's a gaslighter extraordinaire. Waleed Aly. Everyone, if you haven't seen, I did a video on Waleed Aly. I didn't put it up on YouTube. I actually made it a few months ago, and I was reluctant to put it up on YouTube, and then I decided to just make it a BitChute exclusive. I published it this morning. So after the live stream or tomorrow or whatever, go watch it on my BitChute account. But essentially, Waleed Aly is probably Australia's most glorified gaslighter. This guy makes gaslighting a living. Like, he makes a living out of literally gaslighting on every issue.
I consider his level of gaslighting to be boss tier.
Boss tier gaslighting.
Yeah, it's like he creates a labyrinth with his lies, and you have to understand where his lies are actually heading. Because like we'll go through the piece and we'll analyze it paragraph by paragraph. But you've like the whole time you're reading it, you've got to be like, okay, where's he going with this? Like, what's his point? What lie does he actually want to inject into your mind and for you to like take on board? That's the challenging thing when you actually work your way through something by him. It's actually a little bit exhausting. It's one of the reasons why we don't always go through just his Waleed Aly's stuff. It's actually hard work.
Yeah, and it's poorly written as well. He's not a very good writer, and he's not a particularly articulate speaker either. I don't know. I don't think that if this was if he weren't living in cloud world, he would be anywhere near the public sphere. He's not particularly charismatic or intelligent or clever. His ideas aren't particularly innovative or original, and he's a boring, smug fool of an individual. I don't know how I do know how he keeps getting a space on the project. It's because he pushes the right narrative, and the project, pretty sure the project's ratings are in the toilet, but they just keep putting it up because it's left-wing propaganda.
What he's very good at is getting the left-wing narrative across while appearing to look like the nice guy.
Yeah.
Appearing to look really, really reasonable. Like, we'll see it in some of the language that he uses. But it's like there's that snarl still comes through. Like, I'll never forget the look on his face when he was interviewing Julian Assange a couple of years ago.
I never saw it.
There's an interview where and you can tell that Waleed Aly really hates Julian Assange because he blames Julian Assange for helping to get Trump in. And there's just this nasty snarl and just this little bit of tone in his voice that tells you he really doesn't like this guy. So let's open up this piece.
You actually want to open it up?
Yeah.
It's something about Waleed, because they've been advertising this interview that he does with Bob Murphy on Fox Sports all weekend. And the way that the clip that they've got there, Waleed Aly tries so hard. That's he's a massive try-hard. Yeah, okay. And you see, if you go to YouTube, you can actually see him he plays guitar on stage, and it's like, he just tries so hard. But yeah, you're right. He portrays himself as this nice guy. Oh, I'm so reasonable, but it doesn't take much to analyze what he's saying and how dishonest he actually is. He's a truly dishonest individual who is a pathological liar, essentially, but he's very good at pretending that he's nice and that he has a nice, reasonable position. But when you actually listen to what he's saying and you go and look at the facts, you realize that he's just a disgusting, vile bigot and a liar. Anyway, let's go through this article.
Do you have anything there to say, Bradley?
Yeah, maybe the term is, spin meister or propagandist, or there's lots of them around, and particularly on the left, and there are people that like to spin things in a way to make the leftist position sound reasonable, when often it isn't. Look, I myself, I simply do not watch the project, so I don't know a lot about Waleed Aly. Obviously, I've heard stuff through the grapevine about him, and heard that a lot of the people on the right are very hostile to him, probably for good reason. But I haven't seen much of him because I just barely watch Channel 10, and certainly
no worries. We'll go through this.
He's good clickbait, actually. You put anything up about Waleed, and
people go nuts against people. No one likes Waleed Aly. He's very popular with the brainwashed NPC left, because, like Dave said, he's very good at putting across the picture that he is a nice person who just wants to say nice things, and he's got reasonable arguments. So he's he convinces, or it's not that he convinces, he reinforces the left's delusion that they are the nice team, the good guys. He makes them deluded, and he deludes them into thinking that they are not the disgusting, vile, anti-white, violent thugs and NPCs that they are. So he convinces NPCs and reinforces NPCs very, very well. But it doesn't take a high IQ or much of a critical mind to realize how much of a flog he is once you actually break down what he's saying. And this is what we'll go through now. So I'll share this now. And so here we go. Trump's racist tweets have parallels to the abuse apparently of Adam Goods, and there's Waleed Aly. So we got the squad here, which is that's Ilhan Omar, and that's Ocasio-Cortez. I actually don't know who the other two are.
That's the one on the left is the one who said, "Oh, we're going to impeach the motherfucker."
Oh,
yeah,
language, David.
No, I didn't say it. She said it.
Yeah. Apparently, this is the agenda of white. I didn't read that before. This is the agenda of white nationalists. This is his plan to pit us against one another, which is funny because that's literally the socialist communist MO, to divide us and pit us against each other. But anyway, so they say, alas, too often these four women, he's talking obviously about the squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, which must be
she's the one on the left. She's
is
the
it?
Impeached the.
Is that no? That's Ayanna Pressley, isn't it? I thought Ayanna Pressley was black. Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are reduced to their respective religions, ethnicities, and sex. They are deemed interesting primarily because they are women of color, rather than remarkably assertive platform policy they offer. Now, I'd say to this, that's entirely because this is exactly what the left have done with them and with. Yes. I don't want to call it identity politics. I think we need to start using identity politics correctly. Identity politics isn't a bad thing. This is intersectionality politics. Yes. So this is what the left have done. They've gone, oh, look at me, I'm a woman and I'm Hispanic. And she's like, well, I'm a woman and I'm from Somalia, and she's a black woman, and I'm not sure what that one is, but that's their whole shtick. That's the reason the left are promoting them.
Yes. They actually use their identity as a shield.
Yeah.
So they are used to put forward far left socialist ideas, and then when people criticize them, they're told that they're being racist. In that respect, they are exactly the same as Adam Goods. Obviously, Waleed Aly doesn't talk about that. Waleed Aly deflects from that, and instead he compares Donald Trump to Adam Goods, rather than comparing this gang of four to Adam Goods, because like I say, they're using exactly the same way. Present far left ideas. When people criticize you, you're a racist.
Yeah. And it's funny because, and I think that identity first framing says Trump just fine. I'd rather not take the bait. Bull crap.
He's the one, Waleed Aly is the one laying the trap.
He's like, exactly. So, I mean, this just sets the scene. It shows you exactly how dishonest he is. And again, it doesn't take much research or knowledge to understand just how dishonest this sentence is. Like I said, he's saying that they are reduced to their religions, ethnicities, and sex, but he's not adding the fact that it's the left who are doing that.
Yes.
It's the people promoting them that are doing that. It's them that are doing that. You know, it's like, that's a relevant fact. That's very relevant to the discussion.
Yes.
But for some reason, he's just ignored it. It's just like, well, obviously it doesn't matter. Trying to paint the picture that it's not them who are doing it, but it's the people, it's their political opponents who, since their political opponents are mainly conservatives, their political opponents are very stupidly saying that we should ignore all that and just listen to only their policies, which is fair enough, I guess. Well, I guess it's not too stupid because their policies are absolutely idiotic, so you can focus on them. But what we would say is that you should also focus on the fact that they aren't actually Americans, and they are. And Donald Trump is right to say, well, maybe if you hate America so much, you could go back to your home country and fix that first. And he's obviously back, tried to sort of back off a little bit and say, oh, no, I'm saying they should go and fix it and then come back and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But where we would say is like, yeah, they should go back to their own countries because this isn't their country. It's not. And they are not Americans. They will never be Americans because they do not have American DNA. American DNA is European DNA, and it's as simple as that. They are not Americans. They can never be Americans, no matter what the piece of paper says on their passport. And that isn't, that's it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing that they're not Americans. I'm just saying that they're not Americans.
Yeah.
Like, that's just it's the truth of the matter. Like, she's Hispanic. She's not American. I'm Australian. I'm not Hispanic. Yeah. I'm not Sudanese. I'm not Somalian. And it's basically it's that. Somalia. But that's the thing. It's like, are they calling them Americans? Is like, can I go to Somalia and say, well, I'm Somalian now? Like, it doesn't. No, you can't do that. Like, they're not Americans. Just as I'm not Latino, Somalian, African, or Middle Eastern. It's as simple as that. But anyway, we should be talking about that. But yeah, that my point is that he's basically he's definitely gaslighting in that. But we'll move on to the next one. So, to be sure, there are some important differences. Trump was hurling naked racist insults at the four women, while Goods was subject to a more coded abuse. Who's racist? Dave? Racist! Elements had to be deduced rather than merely quoted. So with regards to this one, first of all, I mentioned it in the little article for the video today, is that nothing about the criticism wasn't abuse. No one abused Adam Goods, really. I mean, maybe there were a couple of fools in the crowd who might have yelled abuse at him. I mean, he's a football player, but who cares? But there was nothing coded about the criticism of Adam Goods. Nothing was coded whatsoever. People were very, very clear about why they were booing Adam Goods. I knew exactly why. There was nothing coded about it.
Well, but that's what Waleed is trying to do here.
Yeah.
He's trying to say, this is your subconscious bias coming through. When you say we don't like Adam Goods because he's a cheat and he said all these bad things about Australia, what you really mean is that you're racist.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. And essentially what he's saying is that because, like you mentioned before, because white people are criticizing him, that makes it racism. Yeah. And that's essentially the argument here. And it's like it had to be deduced. So you had to essentially read into it to get that the racist insults, blah 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 blah. It's a lot. What do you reckon of that one, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, again, you're absolutely right. I mean, the left will basically do that. They will try and apply the racist tag any way they can. They'll just manipulate the language, the dialectics, to throw the racist tag around all over the place and just apply it in an extremely selective way. They'll stretch the definition here and there, and it's just BS. People just have to understand that the left have an agenda, and that agenda is really one of keeping white people weak, disconnected, subordinate to other races, down the bottom of the racial hierarchy, and elevate non-whites, and I think in particular Aborigines, to the very top of the PC racial hierarchy. And, that's what they try and do. I'm just going to make a little point about, you're talking about, who might be considered American. And I think obviously this would apply with Australian as well. I personally am of the view that being Australian is kind of like what I would call like a matter of degree. I think you can be a little bit more Australian. One person could be a bit more Australian than another person can be, sort of thing. For example, somebody of, let's say, Somali ancestry might be born in Australia. They might take on the obviously the English language and aspects of Australian culture and all that sort of thing. They might be very well assimilated, but you could never say that they are truly Australian. You might say that they are a Somali Australian, just like if a white Australian person went to Somalia and lived there for a few years and learned to speak the language there, and that, they might become like an Australian Somali, but they would never be just a Somali. So I think it becomes a little bit of a matter of degree sort of thing. That's how I perceive it anyway. And obviously that I think will apply to the USA as well. Some people are more American than others are. Yes, some people are more Australian than others are. Some people are more Indian than others are, or Japanese or Somali or whatever. I think that's how it is.
Yeah. Okay. So on the next point here, we have Trump is dealing with sworn political foes engaged in a formal partisan battle while goods was conscripted into a conflict he never chose. Now, this is probably one of the biggest gaslights in the entire article, because if you watch the documentary, it's very clear that Goods went out of his way to go into the Aboriginal anti-racism activism field.
He really wanted
to be there. So the idea that he was conscripted and he never chose it is a flat out lie. Like, he's lying. That is an untruth. It's not even gaslighting. It's an untruth. He is not telling the truth. And I always say that this kind of lying, you shouldn't be allowed to lie in public.
Yeah, that's exactly
that is a lie. He should not be allowed. That should not be printed. And the Sydney Morning Herald should have said to him, "That's a lie. You can't print that because it's so obviously untrue that anyone who knows what happened, anyone who was alive for the period and was paying attention, knows that Adam Goods chose the conflict himself. He conscripted himself. He wasn't forced into it. He could have backed away and said, well, I don't really want the public life at all. But he didn't. And that's ultimately the reason he got booed, because he chose that public life. He didn't need to. He could have backed off any time he liked as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And also, don't forget that he was very involved. He was the the most high-profile member of that Racism It Stops With Me government-funded campaign. So, there was obviously powerful people who were deciding to use Adam Goods to push an agenda, and he obviously agreed to that. And it's one of those things, there's so many people around, and leftists in particular are like this, they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want Adam Goods to be held up as this doyen of virtue and, this Aboriginal superhero sort of thing. And then, he's trying to preach to the public about the wrongs of racism. And you don't get everything your own way in life. And when it doesn't go the way that they want it to, they whinge and whine and snarl and accuse Australians of being racist and what have you. And it's all just a load of BS, but it is what it is.
Yep. So, next up we have here, in short, Trump has treated the Democratic Congresswoman in a way that violates the term of legitimate combat. Goods wasn't voluntarily in combat to begin with. So, there's just so much wrong with these two sentences. Donald Trump has not always done his offer valid criticisms of them. if valid criticism of people in politics violates the terms of legitimate combat, then what's politics? What a lot of crap.
Also, that gang of four, they're the ones, again, who brought up their own race.
They exactly
promote themselves as they're as Somali, as as Latina, and like they're actually on record as saying like the time of the white man is over. Basically.
Yeah, they say all this stuff, and he's responded extremely reasonably compared to the absolute lunacy that comes out of their mouths. And for some reason, that violates the terms of legitimate combat. Who writes the terms of legitimate combat? If what Trump said violates it, show me the rules. He hasn't slandered them. He hasn't told lies about them, and people on the left tell lies about him constantly. He's just said that if you don't like America, go home to your countries, fix them, and come back and tell us how. That's a legitimate thing to say, and it's actually an extremely reasonable thing to say. I'd be much less polite. But then he comes out, and then
you wouldn't tell them that they can come back.
No, I'd say just go back and fix your own countries and don't come back if you hate us so much. Go away. It's like, and I wouldn't back down on that either. It's the honest truth. That's what they should do if they hate the country so much. And then again, he repeats this lie that Goods wasn't voluntarily in combat to begin with. Lie, 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 lie. That is a lie. You are a liar, Waleed Aly. You are a massive liar.
Matty will call you out.
No, I'll call you out. You liar. You're a liar. That is a lie. You are telling an untruth there. And you know it too. It's a deliberate lie, and it should be against the law to tell lies like that. But anyway, just as in Good's case, it's not as simple as color. Trump isn't telling those who stand under banners screaming blacks or Latinos for Trump to go back, just as critics of Goods love to point out that there were more than 70 Indigenous players in the AFL who weren't getting booed at the time. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, he tries to deflect this afterwards.
That is really interesting deflection. He's basically trying to take the legitimate argument of why this isn't racist and say, oh no, that's racist too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh no. Just because you didn't boo them, it's like if you like, let's say you like every non-white person on the planet, but you're critical of one non-white person and you're a racist. It's like what? Yeah. What? That is ridiculous. That's ridiculous. But it just shows how stupid the word is. I mean, it is just an anti-white racial slur at the end of the day. But I mean, even accepting the premise of the term, that is a ridiculous standard to live by. How could, like, what the hell? So here are my 10 great mates who are non-whites. Adam Goods is a flog. You're racist. So what? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Literally no sense. Now, we'll move on. So that sort of thing is falsely offered as a defense against the charge of racism because it pretends racism can only exist if the prejudice in question applies to every single member of a race. That if something is not exclusively about skin color, then race is not a factor of all, but that's almost never how it works. So
he's saying you all have unconscious bias.
Yeah.
Absolute canard.
Yeah. So basically, if you're even critical once of any black person or any non-white person, then that makes you a racist because clearly you wouldn't be critical of a non-white person unless you didn't like non-white people. And that's the argument that he's saying there. So, yeah, it's the unconscious bias thing, but it's also putting non-white people above white people blatantly. It's saying that us as white European descended individuals are not allowed to be critical of people who are not white. That's his argument in a nutshell there. That is flat out anti-whiteism there, and it's actually and it's non-white racial superiority and supremacy.
It's another example of what I was talking about before. Like the definition of racism is actually racist.
Yeah. It's racism, and it shows that basically what he's saying there is that again he's explaining to us without realizing it that racism is literally just a word used to shut white people up. And that's ultimately all it is. And so did you want to say anything about that, Brad?
Yes. Again, it's just you're absolutely right. It's just a psychopolitical weapon basically used to keep white people subordinate and to sort of rig the morality so that, white people are basically kept at the bottom of the racial hierarchy. And you're absolutely correct. I mean, I mean, underlying that is this premise that white people must always be highly favourable toward non-whites. We must be highly inclusive of them in our society. We're not allowed to be in any way critical of them. There's no accountability there. There's no scrutiny there. Instead, they are perceived to be too precious, special, valuable, or important to ever be subjected to any kind of criticism, accountability, or scrutiny. And inevitably, that's not just taken from the individual micro level as well, it's also taken to the macro political level as well. So if you have a view that's unfavourable toward immigration or mass, non-white immigration, then you're automatically a racist. It's just, again, you're not allowed to have that political view. It's you just can't win. They rigged the game. They rigged the rules, and people just need to realise.
So you just reject the game. You got to reject it and just call it out.
Yeah, don't play by your enemy's rules.
Anyway, he said more often racism lives in the. This is just quintessential Waleed Aly gaslighting, flat out lies again.
It's exhausting.
It is exhausting just how dishonest this flog is. More often, racism lives in the double standards. That means someone gets attacked in a way a white person never would, even if they were to behave in the same way. Racism doesn't require a belief that there are no good blacks. In fact, it frequently relies on the good, precisely because it wants to identify the bad. So you're racist if you judge people as individuals, essentially there, which is what he's saying there.
Yeah.
If you judge people as individuals, but you somehow judge a black person negatively, that makes you a racist, firstly. Yeah. But also, the idea that, that they get attacked in a way that a white person never would. Yeah. How about the fact that white people get attacked every single day in the way that a non-white person never, ever, ever, ever would? And like we said before, if the races were reversed here, that white person would be hounded out of public life for good and branded a racist for the rest of his life by these same lying, sycophantic douchebags like Waleed Aly. What a load of crap.
It's a complete reverse. It's a complete reversal of reality.
It's inversion. It's satanic. Inversion. It's literally satanic inversion right there. He's literally taking the truth and saying that reality is the opposite of what reality actually is. Saying, a white person would never get attacked in that way. Well, I mean, you're right. A white person wouldn't get attacked in that way. A white person would get hounded out of public life by the media who are defending Adam Goodes right now. So they wouldn't get attacked in that way. It would be much, much worse. Not only would they get attacked in a much worse fashion, anyone who defended that white person would be branded a racist.
Yes.
Anyone who defended them. So this is flat out satanic inversion, and it's more lies from a guy who is basically made a living out of being a smug liar. He's a smug liar. We should be able to sue him for parasitism. He's bringing down our civilization with these lies. He's imposing a cost on us by lying with it. Prove me wrong. Waleed Aly is imposing a cost on us with his lies in this manner, because not only is he dividing this society, not only is he creating bad blood, but he is attacking our heritage and our people and telling us to shut up because of the color of our skin. This man should be completely. Let's forget about Adam Goodes and just kick Waleed Aly out of public life. How does that sound? I think that's a much better solution.
Tell him to go back to his shithole country.
Yes, go back, leave. You don't like us. We don't like you. Go away. Yeah. And that's not to do with his ethnicity, by the way. I'm sure there are some lovely Egyptian people. It's because he's a flog and a liar, and that's the only reason. Him, individual person who is a public figure, is a liar. Now, did you want to have anything to add on that, or can we move on, Brad?
No, I don't have anything more to say.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dishonesty annoys me. Put it that way. Dishonesty is extremely troubling to me. Anyway, this is Dave's time to shine.
Okay,
this is Dave. Oh, by the way, I mean, you'll see it later on, but Dave's wearing the gayest headphones I've ever seen in my entire life.
Your gay headphones.
No, they're not actually. They're my wife's headphones, but we're wearing them though. That's it. Anyway, so Dave's time to shine now. So do you want to read this
next couple of paragraphs? Whenever I read something by Waleed Aly, I understand that like he's lying all the way through. As I was saying at the start, he creates labyrinths with his lies.
Yeah.
He creates those labyrinths to get you bogged down, trying to make sense of all the stuff that he's just said. And then when he's got you just in that right spot, that's when he hits you with what he wants to hit you with.
Yep.
So these paragraphs here, that becomes especially clear in cases such as these, which involve people in esteemed positions. Goods abuse only begins in earnest after he's named Australian of the Year. He doesn't mention the fact that he was named Australian after the year after he abused the 13-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And he said...
He was actually booed before that, by the way, as well.
Yep.
And you see that in the documentary.
Yeah.
He was booed before.
Yeah, right, okay. So there's
another lie.
Oh,
man.
At no stage in the piece does Waleed Aly mention the fact that Goods said... just remember whose land you're on.
Yeah.
So he never mentions that.
Yep.
So Trump's targets are duly elected sworn members of America's highest legislative body. The thing they have in common is that they not that they are separatists seeking to isolate themselves from the nation. It's that they are deeply and centrally embedded in national institutions. They do not contribute to public conversations as outsiders, but emphatically as insiders. They assume they belong and behave accordingly. And that's exactly what makes them threatening, because they imply a national identity that is broad enough to include them. This is where Waleed has been going the entire time. And this is why I make the case that we've got to be careful about just arguing along the sort of CivNat line and saying, we're not being racist.
Yeah.
This is why we have to challenge the whole concept of racism.
Yep.
And this is why we have to reaffirm the concept that a nation is something that's built on people, on a people, on one people. And a nation is built up of a people living in a certain geographic area. You can't have a nation composed of lots of people because diversity plus proximity equals conflict, and it never ends well. So what Waleed Aly is doing here, he's reinforcing the idea that America and that Australia are not countries built on one people. They're countries built on what the
diversity.
left likes to call diversity.
So basically, he's pushing the narrative of white replacement here implicitly without actually saying it. Yeah,
as this always, this sort of stuff always does. Yeah, and this is the lie. This is the gaslight of the entire piece. This is where he's driving. And so it's funny because, we should not get trapped on the whole CivNat level. Because he's working on the ethnic national level.
So he's trying to argue against the ethnic nationalist level without actually saying it. So instead of outright saying, well, instead of outright arguing against the ethnic nationalist arguments, because he can't argue against ethnic nationalist arguments, he's just pushing that CivNat argument, and he's pushing that civic nationalist argument, trying to say that we're all a divided people, and pushing multiculturalism, and that, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Well, that's what he's trying to do. He's just trying to push multiculturalism, just like you said. That is what he's trying to do. And I already mentioned that.
Because civic nationalism is basically a form of multiculturalism. It's basically like white people going along with multiculturalism, but trying to insist that they're not racist.
And he's sort of saying, the problem for us, or the evil Ray people, is that they are within the national institutions, and that they assume that they belong and they behave accordingly. And that's exactly what makes them threatening, because they imply a national identity that is broad enough to include them. But the thing is, it's the fact that we have included them is a threat to our people. And he's trying to say that by us feeling threatened by this genuine threat to us, that we're somehow bad people for actually feeling a genuine threat. But imagine if it was the other way around.
So again, the message is stay asleep, white man. Don't stand up for yourself. Don't stand up for your country. Don't assert that you have a white country.
And it's a lie that our countries are built, it's especially a lie that Australia was built on multiracialism. That is a flat out lie. Again, that's a gaslight. Australia was built on monoracialism. It's the reason we have Australia in the first place. It's the reason we have a constitution, because we wanted to be a united people. Australia was meant to be, like the Australian founders saw the multiracial problems of America, and I think America and some other countries, and said, we don't want that, so we're going to make it a white ethno state so we don't have to worry about those problems. The problem, the mistake that they made was not putting it explicitly in the Constitution, thus forcing anti-whites to have a vote on it if they ever wanted to change it.
They didn't think they'd need to.
I know they didn't think they'd need to. And the thing about it's like the US founding fathers, and John Mark mentioned this in his most recent video, the US founding fathers wrote the US Constitution 50 years before Karl Marx was even born. So they didn't expect the communist infiltration to happen. So they didn't, it wasn't part of their psyche. They didn't think they'd ever need it. They didn't imagine a world where they would need it. And unfortunately, they were blindsided. They were naive, but not through any fault of their own.
Bradley, this is family in your territory. Do you have anything more to add here?
Sorry, mate, I missed that.
So I was just saying that this sort of level of discussion's family in your area. Do you have anything to add there?
That's absolutely correct. Also, with Australia, the analogy there of how the Americans would not have imagined Marxism to have come along 50 years later, sort of thing. And I think that's also, with Australia back in the day of, the White Australia policy. I mean, we would, at the time, would not have imagined Australia to one day become the multiracial utopia that we are now. I mean, back 100 years ago, they would just simply not have imagined it. But unfortunately, how the times have changed and how things have flipped almost 180 degrees.
Yeah. This is why I think proprietarianism is good, because proprietarianism would correctly identify this multiracialism as imposing a cost on us as a people. Because if you add non-white individuals, it's not even just non-white individuals, if you add people who are outside of our collective ethnic group, that dilutes our own genetics and imposes a cost on our genetic family and our kin and what would be traditionally called a nation, and proprietarianism would seek to rectify that. So if anyone tried to do that, then you could rightfully sue them for imposing that cost. But anyway, the next one, were these people true identity radicals? That wouldn't be necessary. They'd have excluded themselves and would thereby cease to be a national identity threat. And it's like you said, like if they were actually standing up for their own people, they would say, all right, yeah. They'd actually be more on our side in a lot of ways. They would be more on our side because they respect our arguments.
Waleed Aly is actually arguing against Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, exactly. That's ironic, isn't it? He is, and I mean, he does make. He's right. If they were racial identitarians, if they were actually racial identitarians, then they would be making racial identitarian points, and they'd be making separatist points. But the problem for these women is that they are parasites and they need to parasite off white European people in order to exist. Yeah. So they can't make racial identity arguments, because if they make racial identity arguments, they'd exclude themselves and they wouldn't be able to enter public life at all.
And if there's anything these SJWs don't want, it's for all the people of the world to live peacefully in their own nations all by themselves.
Yeah, exactly. They want us to all mix up so that we'll fight. That's the whole globalist agenda, really. So that we fight, we create a war, and then they can come in and take us over in after World War III. That's their goal, and they're not shy about that goal. They want us to fight. They want civil war. They want people to destroy. They want us to destroy ourselves so that NATO can come in and say, well, we'll take care of everything, and you just have to pledge your allegiance to this multinational one world government. And you got to be wary of it and understand that if something happens, the trick is to we need to set up our own groups and our own. If there was ever a worldwide conflict like that, you have to set up your own territories and just reject any outside force and repel it as much as you can, because any international force is basically spelling Agenda 21 and genocide of the human race. But anyway, the real trouble starts when they occupy a middle position, proud of both their nation and their racial or religious background, comfortable enough in their multiple identities to buy into the country without glossing over the claims and struggles of the minorities within it. So yeah, again, it's like you said, He's trying to point out that he's trying to say that the country actually is about more than just a racial identity. It's about multiple identities living under these values, and that the fact is that we're upset because they are proud of their racial identity and their national identity. But what I'd say to that is, what would happen if white people said that we were proud of our racial identity? What happened to Israel Folau, who was proud of his religious background? So the real trouble actually starts when people offer up an opinion and and take on their own, or especially white people or Christians or men, take on an identity that conflicts with the leftist narrative. And this is what's happened here. So the crowd has called out Adam Goodes for his provocative words, his provocative actions. It's been predominantly white people calling that out and standing up for our own people because he's attacked us. And then all of a sudden, we aren't allowed to have our own racial identity, but he's allowed to have his own racial identity. Oh, and by the way, Australia isn't actually a people. We're not a people. Australians aren't a people. Australians is just anyone who comes here and has a passport.
It's interesting that again, this is a very clever lie, describing the people who want to have, as he's calling it, multiple identities as occupying a middle position. That's actually the extremist position.
Yeah.
The normal people are the people who want to have their own national identity in their own country. The people who cause the issues, who divide a country, are the SJWs who take this socialist idea that like you can have a country based on something other than national identity. Yeah,
that's right. And again, it's that gaslighting, that idea that that's somehow a middle ground. And that's a radical position.
Yeah.
If you look at all of history and how countries and politics has been conducted over thousands of years, it's invariably along ethnic grounds. And even if you probably go back into Roman and Greek times, you'd see probably there would be ethnic differences between the ruling class and the people that they rule. I mean, you have a look at just Spartans, for instance. So the Spartans conquered the Helots, and the Spartans were a distinct ethnicity and the Helots were a distinct ethnicity. So these are ethnicity, and which is ultimately DNA, rules. It rules throughout history, and it rules through the way people consider themselves. So I think that, their position is not anywhere near a middle ground. It is extremely radical. Anyway, we'll get on to this last point. Sorry, sorry, Brad, if you want to say something, but just wanted to move on. So the people. So this is the yellow bit. This is the bit that I thought was the piece de resistance, because just look at Captain Smug Waleed Aly there. The people most targeted in this way are those who've worked the hardest to build bridges between unreconciled worlds. Are you kidding? Yeah. Telling everyone that they're racist is building bridges. It's like, you're a terrible person. I'm trying to build bridges, you terrible person. You're horrible. Go away. I'm building bridges. It's like, what are you talking about? You can't build bridges by smashing them first. Come on, it's like, it doesn't work. There's a bridge.
That's the quote of the day. You can't build bridges by smashing them first.
Exactly. But certainly that is the good story. And Indigenous, well, I'm Indigenous. Indigenous means naturally occurring somewhere, and I naturally occurred here, so I'm Indigenous. Anyway, man who would call out racial abuse directed at his way. There was no racial abuse directed at his way. The 13-year-old girl called him an ape because he's hairy. I've been called an ape before. I'm white. I don't consider it racial abuse. He's half white. He's hairy. And let's face it, like, what can you say? Look at the guy. I've met plenty of white guys who I would consider ape-like. It's a look. It's a hairiness.
I've met a white.
Look at this. I'll show you. Look at my arms. Look how hairy I am.
I think there are a couple of guys who I've known who we actually used to call Chewbacca.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, give me a break.
White guys.
But anyway, ask that we treat the person who did it with understanding and mercy, who was big enough to describe Australia Day as a great day for Australia. which allows us to celebrate the positives. He also called it Invasion Day, by the way. He said that we invaded.
And he described the Australian Constitution
as
racist.
Yeah, exactly. The Australian Constitution as racist.
And he said, just remember whose land you're on.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't mention any of that.
Of course, including the survival of Indigenous culture, who accepted that European settlement is who we are right now, implying that we won't be like that for the future, but who also acknowledged that Indigenous pain it caused, and that feeling that pain was okay as well. Instinctive, unified, torn down by not by his divisiveness, but by our determined divisions. Now, the thing is, the pain that Indigenous people are supposedly feeling now is entirely because of left-wing activists getting in their ear, telling them that they should feel pain right now. That's the entire thing. I mean, he sort of tries to says put us in their shoes, put yourself in their shoes. I'd say, yeah, if I was an Aboriginal person and I had the choice between living the life that Aborigines lived in 1760 and living the life that Adam Goodes is living right now,
yep.
it wouldn't even be a choice. I'd say, I'll take Adam Goodes' life. Thank you very much. Even if I'm not a football player, I'll take a polite, a clean, healthy, safe life in a Western country. And thank God for the European people who came here and saved us from our savagery, because all reports of what life was like before whites came here, and no sane person would choose that over what they have now. So spare us this rubbish about pain. We made this place better. We created this country. If we weren't here, none of this conversation, if people didn't create this country, none of it would have happened. And none of this would even be possible. We literally created football and the survival of Indigenous culture. No one's stopping them from having their own customs and beliefs. And personally, I think that if they want to have their own sovereign territories, go for your life, but we're cutting off taxpayer money and you can't bring in any foreign companies or anything like that without our permission, because, it's still our land. Anyway, so no one's stopping them from doing that. The only thing that's stopping them is a genuine will. And the reason that they're doing this is ultimately to browbeat white taxpayers into giving them money and browbeat white people into subordinating ourselves to their agenda. And Waleed Aly is doing all he can to essentially keep us down and tell white people to shut up, and we're not allowed to have our own opinions, and we're not allowed to be critical of anyone who isn't. We're not allowed to be critical of anyone who isn't white, and if we're critical of white people, it has to be on the terms that they dictate. End rant.
Okay, I'm going to disagree. Sorry, you go, Brad.
Yeah, no, disagree with me. You're not allowed to disagree with me.
No, you're absolutely right. That just you summed it up very well there, and well done.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with Matty. And this has to do with where Waleed was talking a bit earlier about like separatists. I don't actually think that we are going to reach a resolution of like the problems that Aboriginals face without Aboriginals actually having their own country. Aboriginals are a different race to Australia, to Australians. Australians are European.
The camera's off.
We're British, yeah. Aboriginals are their own race. And at the moment, they're essentially a defeated race. Yeah. So it's a case of, well, what have the Romans done for us lately? Yeah. Okay, we have created we've created the most advanced civilization the world has ever seen. But at the end of the day, the Aboriginals are still a defeated people. And so it's the thing that conservatives miss when we talk about Aboriginal issues. We talk about the greatness of Western civilization, but at the same time, we're taking on that multicultural idea that a country can be made up of different people. So I think ultimately, the Aboriginals are actually going to need their own independent area. They might have to fight for it. They might have to feel like they've fought for it. And the solution could be that, okay, if you want to be Aboriginal, you go to that land which is specifically Aboriginal and you are your own country. If you want to stay in Australia, you no longer identify as an Aboriginal. If you're 1/16th Aboriginal, no.
Yeah.
Let that go. You're a white person.
You're a white person.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about Adam Goodes, especially. I mean, he's half white. He's half Scottish.
Yeah.
Yet he considers himself a proud Aboriginal man. What an insult to us. And the idea,
I've just got this
the idea that
it's
white people that are bad.
I've got this image in my head now of Adam Goodes doing the war dance with the kilt.
He's half Scottish. But doesn't that tell you about the true dynamic within society? How this guy goes out of his way to identify as Aboriginal when half of his heritage is white. Half of his heritage is literally as a Scot. But yeah, I actually agree with you there. I think that if they if they wanted their own land, if all Aboriginal people want their own land, and maybe you'd say they have to fight for it or whatever. But yeah, that's where they can go. But if they stay in our land, if they stay in Australia, then they need to identify as only Australians.
Yeah.
If you want to identify as an Aboriginal, fine, but you have to identify it as an Aboriginal in your own territory. And we won't be paying you any cash. We won't be subsidizing you in any way. But if you wish to go there, then that is your right as a sovereign human being, and we're not going to stop you, which is fair. I think it's fair enough. And yet, if they choose to stay, by all means, stay. Like, they're the ones who are making this such an issue. They're the ones who are constantly telling us we're bad for the color of our skin. I wouldn't give a crap. Honestly, I wouldn't give a crap about any of this if they weren't making it a problem. Like, just live and let live with regards to me. And the Aboriginal population is low enough in the country that their demographic, they're never going to flood our demographics. They're never going to have as much, they're never going to have the influence that flooding us with 10 million Chinese people would have. You know what I mean? So it's not, we could just have a simple live and let live situation. We could have, yeah. But because we've got so many parasites in academia and the media trying to push this conflict and this racial division between whites and Aborigines, that we end up getting all this nonsense. We end up getting guys like Adam Goodes, who is probably, he's a flog, but he's also a tragic figure in a lot of the ways, because he's been influenced by people who are smarter than him. I don't see him as a particularly intelligent individual. That's just my observation. So he's being influenced by people who are probably smarter than him, but they're influencing him in a profoundly negative way, and they're not advising him in a constructive manner that could actually build bridges within our community and within the country.
Okay, look, can I just say this about the whole Aboriginal thing, because I probably have a somewhat different view of it. The Aborigines are actually a very highly diverse people. I mean, we all it's like we've been so conditioned into perceiving them as being Aboriginal, but the reality is they're actually made up of many dozens of different tribes. That's like in my state, there's the Noongars in the southwest of WA, and there's the Wik people in northern Queensland, who are entirely different people, and they're as different from each other as, say, the Greeks are different to the Irish, or different to the Finns, or different to the Spanish. And so, yes, it's kind of like, they're actually very different from each other. And, to see the Aborigines as being all the same people is a bit like, seeing Europeans as all the same people, when, we're actually not. And the other thing that's significant about the Aborigines is that, there's, as I understand it, not very many full bloods left anymore. There's actually been so much interbreeding with the Aborigines and obviously white people, and even with other races, and obviously a lot of that breeding out of the Aboriginality of the Aborigines is something that they've done themselves. They've done it willingly. It's not something that's been imposed on them. And so, this notion that, we could have an Aboriginal nation here or something like that, it just seems so completely bizarre, given the sparseness of Australia, given the wide diversity of the Aboriginal people, the interbreeding with white people. I think that, my take on it is that the Aborigines are Australian. We whites, we British people, we came, we saw, we conquered. And as the conquering people, I think we have an obligation to look after the Aborigines. That it's to sort of like, cut them off and say, well, you can have your bit now, you're on your own sort of thing. But that would be a disaster for them, and I think it would come back and be a disaster for us as well. So I think, let's just see them as Australian, but just as much as possible, just sort of drop the whole divisive identity, or what's the term used a lot?
Intersectionality.
Intersectionality politics thing. Just, drop that whole thing, because that's, it's just what divides people. It's what, it's just not good, and it needs to be dropped.
Yeah, okay. And in addition to that, you could probably add that because so many Aborigines or people who identify as Aborigine today are probably more Australian ethnicity than Aboriginal ethnicity, they could probably assimilate pretty well ultimately in the end. But again, it's that cultural Marxism, the leftism, the communism that's been infected in their brain. It infects them like a virus, like a mind virus. But it's not just Aborigines. It's obviously there are plenty of young white uni students who push the same cultural Marxist rubbish. I mean, so that's a fair point. Anyway, we're coming to the end of it. So we do actually have a couple of super chats through Entropy. If you're not on Entropy, I'll link it now. We are finishing up soon, but that is Entropy, and you can send us a super chat. You can contribute to us that way. We got a couple of super chats so far. One from Squeaky, otherwise known as Dia Beltran. She said, what about Mexicans born in Texas? The land moved and they had no option.
It's called ethnic cleansing, people.
Oh, silly David. I mean, I'm not actually familiar with the situation. I think the problem with Texas right now is that it's not just the Mexicans that were left in Texas when the border moved that are the issue. It's people coming from the other side of the border into Texas. They weren't there when the land moved, but they are coming in there, and they're essentially turning Texas into a blue state because non-whites vote left.
And if you look at the political organization La Raza, the race, they are actually, their whole point is to actually take back Mexican land. They actually want it back. So it's basically a race war still going on there.
Yeah. So maybe in the future we'll see Texas split between whites and Hispanics. Who knows? But anyway, Peter V has sent us. Oh, sorry, Dia, thanks for the $3, by the way. And if you want to send us a super chat, you can come through Catonic, which is Entropy, which I've linked a number of times in the chat. It's a very good way to support it. And there are questions that you can vote on. We'll be answering a few of those in a minute. Peter V has sent $5. Thank you very much, Peter V. He said, if white Anglo civilization did not exist, Adam would be playing with a coconut instead, and Waleed would still be a parasite. Well, I disagree. Adam actually wouldn't exist because he's half white. So, okay. Waleed would be a parasite no matter what. You're correct. You're totally right about that.
And also, if Adam did exist, his likely life expectancy would be shorter than when he retired early as a footballer.
That's true. Yeah. He would have been dead before he retired. Yeah. Fair enough. So yeah, thanks for that. Anyway, we got a few questions here. I'll just answer a couple of them and then we'll finish up. Cal Climate has asked, way out of left field, was Port Arthur a false flag? And he's asking these through Entropy, by the way. If you want to ask us questions, this is the only way we'll be answering questions from going forward. In my opinion, I do believe that Port Arthur was a false flag. I don't think that a bloke with an IQ of 65 was capable of a military precision operation, and I don't think that Martin Bryant did it. If you read the transcript of his interview, the guy's a half-wit, and no, I don't. Based on what I've read and what I've seen, I'm not convinced. And there's never been a royal. It's funny because Jacinda Ardern comes out after Christchurch and she's like, "We must have a royal commission. We must find out. We must get straight to the bottom of it." Doesn't that put it in contrast to Port Arthur, where it was all stop asking questions. Stop asking questions.
Yeah, right.
There's never been a royal commission into Port Arthur. And for me, I believe it was, a false flag designed to take our guns away, ultimately. And it was probably Mossad. So, probably the same people who may have done a few other false flags in the past that we know as like maybe this the USS Liberty back in the day. Similar people. Our greatest ally, who's their greatest ally, despite not offering us any value whatsoever, as far as I can tell. I mean, what have they ever done for us, actually, genuinely? Anyway, what do you reckon, Brad?
I have absolutely no comment.
No comment.
Smart man.
Fair enough. I'm pushing the conspiracy theories. Anyway. And what do you reckon, David?
I reckon you're probably right.
Yeah. Squeaky's asked the question, Matty, how come you've never been on camera with James Fox Higgins? Have you ever had a conversation with him? Well, there's a reason I've never been on camera with him. It's because I am him. in case you didn't realize that, I am James Fox Higgins. No, that's silly.
You're probably right.
I have been on camera with James Fox Higgins for the Uncackables live stream on the election. I was pretty.
We interviewed.
No, we were just talking. Like, he came on the show at the end of the night. I was already pretty drunk.
Oh yes, of course, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. So I have been on camera with James Fox Higgins, and I don't know. I've just never done. I haven't done the Uncackables with him other than that. So I don't know. It's just
in shifts.
Yeah, we do it in shifts, and I've been pretty lazy lately. We've got other things that I'm worrying about. And Reason V versus Myth has said, why do white people care about being called racist? Decades and decades of brainwashing and propaganda. Yeah, decades and decades of brainwashing and propaganda have told people to think that they've told people from an early age that being called a racist is the worst thing that could possibly happen to you. And then if someone's a racist, then that's somehow terrible. Yeah, what do you reckon? I'm not. We're just going to answer the first three because they were the ones that got the vote ups. But yeah. Sorry for the other people. If you send super chats, we'll definitely answer any questions. But I think I said last week that we'd answer the top three. But anyway, Brad.
Yeah, absolutely correct. You just summed it up extremely well. It's all to do with brainwashing.
Yeah, it's all brainwashing. David, you obviously agree. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you've really enjoyed the show. Sorry again for starting a little bit late if you're here from the start. The result of the poll in the Entropy chat, the question was, is Adam Goods an anti-white? And it was 100% yes to 0% no. So I think it's unanimous in our scientific poll. Completely scientific.
Yeah. And representative of the Australian population as
well. Yep, definitely. definitely. SD has said, read out my question. SD. No one. I don't think so. Let's just look at this. Come on to my Discord chat and I'll answer that question for you a little bit more specifically. Well, obviously, I think there were things that happened, but
some guys did some things.
Some guys did some things that they probably shouldn't have, but I don't think that the narrative being pushed is exactly 100% the truth.
Yeah, probably.
If you ask me, and my rule is, if something is apparently, if you have to make something illegal to question, then it's probably a good idea to question it.
I prefer to be morally right than factually right.
And as for your other question, I'm not going to read that one out either. But good point. Anyway, yeah. They're all asking us all these crazy questions right at the end.
That's how they get us.
Yeah, that's how they get us. If you're on Entropy, you can read those. You can read the questions. I'm getting rid of them all now. But anyway, thank you very much, Bradley from the Australian Protectionist Party. Thank you very much, everyone, for viewing us. Mate, can I ask you to please share the stream? Please tell people about it. Please encourage people to come and watch us, because literally the only way that we're ever going to grow and we're ever going to get a bigger audience is if you our viewer and or listener tells people about it, because essentially the channel's been shadow banned. My main channel's been shadow banned. But I mean, I guess you couldn't really call it a shadow ban, because it's every independent creator has had the exact same issue.
Also that on Facebook, and talking about James Fox Higgins.
Yep.
I actually tried to share one of James Fox Higgins' articles from the Rational Rise on Facebook the other day, and I was not allowed to share it. Like, I was told even before I posted it that it violated Facebook's terms and conditions.
Seriously?
Absolutely seriously. They've blacklisted the Rational Rise.
Oh, why do people even still use Facebook? Honestly,
yeah, 2 or 3.
Yeah, I don't use it at all. I don't know anyone who actually uses it anymore, to be honest. But yeah, that someone just said that YouTube unsubscribed them from the channel in the main chat. Oh, wow. It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. I notice that every now and then, subscribers just drop randomly, and I'm sure a lot of people haven't got notifications today. So you got to make sure the notifications are turned on. But the thing about notifications is we're on the same time every week. So, I mean, I know we're a couple of minutes late every time. We do say about 9:15. It's always about 9:15 when we start. We do aim for 9:15, but sometimes.
The kidness said here that liking an Uncuckables episode got my Google account blacklisted.
No, he's just being a fool. He's being silly. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Anyway. Thank you again, Bradley, for joining us. Please share us around. Please leave a comment as well. Like, not just a chat, leave an actual comment, because that helps us. Sharing helps us. Click the notification bell if you haven't already, so you do get notified. Well, you at least have a chance of getting notified, I guess. But, please just take note in your diary that this is when we're on every week at about 9:15 on Monday nights, unless I otherwise specify. And if you don't know where I specify on the Discord channel and on all my social media. We were sick. Both me and Dave were actually sick a couple of weeks ago, so we miss it. And yes, notifications are sometimes a little bit late for people. So yeah, you just have to actually, you have to come here manually. I know it's a pain in the ass, but YouTube are desperate to stop the spread of truth, because they are part of the same globalist agenda that is fighting against us, that we're fighting against, that we're trying to wake people up to. So it would be naive to think that they were going to allow us to counter their dishonest narratives without any kind of pushback whatsoever. Thankfully, we still have Entropy so that we can at least monetize a little bit. But anyway, thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks again, Brad. Dave, you suck, as does the Melbourne Demons. Okay. Go the Hawks. Well, that's not what your headphones say. But anyway, have a good one, guys. We'll see you around.